All right, it is fight night. We got a fighter from Brooklyn who will be fighting at the theater at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night. That would be former lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez. He is going to battle undefeated WBO light welterweight champ, that is Josh Taylor. So let's break it down with the host of the mandatory boxing show, repping Vancouver to the fullest. That will be Chantel Shand. You see her to the left. And Brian Fonseca, who's a very proud Puerto Rican who's happy because this is the weekend of the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Guys, how you doing?
Thanks so much for having us, Dex. Appreciate it.
Good.
Very well, Dex. Thank you for having us.
Look, I'm glad you're... Brian, I'm surprised you don't have the Puerto Rican flag. I'm surprised you're not waving it about this weekend. I know how you...
I will be tonight and I will be tomorrow.
There we go.
We gotta conserve our energy early on.
All right, so I'm glad you got the energy for this interview right here. Chantel, I'm going to start with you about this fight because both Taylor and Lopez, they're considered among boxing's rising stars, and both are coming off disputed split decision victories. Taylor is the favorite heading into this bout. Is he a worthy favorite when it comes to this fight?
I think he definitely is, and there's reasons for it because he has done more in this division than Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez only has 2 fights at 140 pounds. They're both victories. You mentioned one of them, though, was a controversial split decision against Sandor Martin. The other one was a TKO victory over Pedro Campa. And as for Josh Taylor, he was undisputed not too long ago. Now, he's also coming off a controversial win against Jack Catterall. A lot of people thought that Jack Catterall actually won that fight and that he got robbed. I was one of those people. However, he does have that victory on his resume. Also, he has a win over Regis Prograis, which is debatable as well. But he does have a very convincing win against a guy like Jose Ramirez that he actually dropped twice in that fight. So he's done more at 140 pounds than Teofimo Lopez, and that's why I think he's the favorite coming into this one.
All right, and it's interesting to see because he's got more experience there at that weight class. And Brian, I want to ask you about Lopez because for people who've been following him, he's had some interesting comments, to say the least, prior to this fight. He has moved up in weight. In his last fight, he barely survived with a split decision against late replacement opponent Sandor Martin. He's the underdog here with seemingly a lot to prove. Does that make him a dangerous fighter in this matchup?
He's absolutely a wild card, okay? Teofimo Lopez is a wild card because you just don't really know. There's a lot of unpredictability there. And while he's somebody who did lose to Sandor Martin, or almost lost to Sandor Martin in his last fight, rather, and a lot of people did think he lost, he is somebody who can come out and actually knock out Josh Taylor, and it wouldn't surprise me, but I think Josh Taylor is rightfully the favorite for this fight. He's about 2-1 at the time we're recording this, and that's something that grew over time because he was less of a favorite before. But Josh Taylor is somebody who you can kind of rely on more in terms of the mentality and coming in, and he's really been assertive about wanting to get rid of Teofimo Lopez in this fight. And Teofimo Lopez, there's just a lot there, like, you know, the whole questioning himself after the fight, just the weird quotes in the press conference leading up to this one, you know, barely making weight. It looked like he had to strip down to make the 140-pound limit, which was interesting, right? Because people thought that Josh Taylor might have a problem shedding weight. But Josh Taylor also hasn't been in the ring for 16 months. So there's things on both sides, variables that you can count on that can kind of be like disruptive to what ultimately may happen. I think Teofimo Lopez can win this fight. And he's absolutely a wild card for sure, and has the punching power and is super dynamic, right? When he's on, he's as good as practically anybody. But Josh Taylor seems to be very focused, very much wanting to put this away, and very much wanting to rid himself of that Jack Catterall performance.
All right, so this is interesting because Chantel, you're saying that Taylor is a worthy favorite. Brian, you believe that Lopez is a wild card here. So guys, it's time to make your picks, best bets for this fight. Give me your best bet and who you think wins the Taylor versus Lopez bout. Chantel, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to go straight up on the money line, Dex, and I'm going to take Teofimo Lopez. I say this because as much as he is a wild card, we've seen him convincingly beat a guy like Lomachenko. I know that was at 135 pounds, but he showed in that fight that he has skill. Now, we know that he lost to George Kambosos Jr., but that was a fight where he came in with a terrible game plan, and he was going through a lot of things outside of the ring with his mental health issues and all of that. But as for Josh Taylor, I'm taking a look at his last fight against Jack Catterall, and I always get killed for this, but I thought Jack Catterall really exposed him. He also dropped him in that fight as well. Now, Josh Taylor has the experience in this this division. But when you take a look at a guy like Teofimo Lopez, who is extremely explosive, great counterpuncher, and the thing is, Josh Taylor is not hard to hit. So if Teofimo Lopez, if we're going to see the guy that we saw against Lomachenko, and he's going to add in that power as well, if he lands on Josh Taylor, who was dropped by Jack Catterall, I think there's a very good chance we could see Teofimo Lopez win by knockout or even slightly on the card. So I'm going to roll with him straight up on the money line.
All right, rolling with Lopez straight up on the money line. Brian, are you doing the same here?
The more reliable bet for me is to take Josh Taylor, but I wouldn't do it on the money line because that's around minus 200 at this point. I think Josh Taylor wins ultimately by decision. You could find that plus 160, plus 170, sort of in that range. It was plus 180 earlier this week, but that's coming down a little bit because that's sort of the expectation of how this is going to go. I do think that Teofimo Lopez can win this fight, though, and I would sprinkle on him to win by knockout because the odds are at plus 500, and he's such a wild card. He does have the power. If he lands an overhand right, if Josh Taylor wants to get inside and really try to use his size to sort of bully his opponents, which he's done in the past, then yeah, I think that Teofimo Lopez can get that knockout. But I would favor the Josh Taylor decision. I do think that Teofimo Lopez can get it done. So I'll hedge a little bit, but I'm favoring Josh Taylor because all signs for me being around that atmosphere sort of point to him getting it done.
All right, should be an interesting one on Saturday night. Taylor versus Lopez. You got the two hosts from the mandatory, Chantal Shan, Brian Fonseca. They will have a post-fight show. Check that out. Go subscribe to their YouTube channel. Do that. Guys, thanks for joining me. Always great to talk some boxing with you and enjoy the fight.